are being webcast live and will be capable of repeated viewing. Do any members wish to declare any interest in relation to any matters on the agenda this afternoon? No? Excellent. Does Cabinet agree to retain the items listed in Part 2 of the agenda as confidential items as defined by the Local Government Act 1972, and as such to request members of the press and public and any members or officers who do not have a direct interest in the items to leave when the items are reached this afternoon? Agreed. Excellent. Thank you. Does Cabinet agree to the minutes of the previous meeting as an accurate record? Agreed. Thanks very much. Today we are discussing filling our potholes, resurfacing our roads, maximising our assets so we can fund better services for residents and get more homes built in our beacon city. We are also discussing a transfer of our learning disability services to maintain standards and drive efficiencies. And we're discussing building bigger beaches. Councillor Mouton is not just the councillor that never sleeps. He's now going to fashion himself as King Canute, hold back our tides, protect our coast and ensure that residents have more beach to enjoy in years to come. So turning to the items that we are going to be discussing today, we are first of all going to be looking to approve the capital asset strategy that will guide how council assets are managed to support investment in housing sustainability and improve services. This council owns a significant amount of land and property, including buildings for services, commercial properties, agricultural land and seafront assets. The management and continual review of these assets enables better service delivery and innovation. It supports our important council plan, and it's also how we can help to balance our budget, which is especially important in these challenging financial times. In developing the strategy, our property portfolios have been reviewed and analysed to identify opportunities for changes, including development or rationalisation, that will help us to deliver the efficiencies we need to balance our budget, maintain services and improve performance, as well as investing in important projects like Madeira Terraces, the refurbishment of the King Alfred and Valley Gardens, as well as improvements on our roads. We're also going to be deciding today the details of how more than £8 million will be invested to improve Brighton and Hove's roads, pavements and transport infrastructure as part of our local transport plan. The plans include tackling potholes, improving safety and supporting sustainable travel. Many years of woeful, conservative underinvestment has led to a huge backlog in repairs and unacceptable conditions on our road surfaces. This plan will see us prioritise the areas most in need of improvement over the next 12 months, as well as investing in the future. It includes a welcome increase of £1.6 million from our Labour government for road maintenance. We're going to discuss this afternoon and decide on the next phase of our sea defences scheme in Hove and Southwick, the biggest in the area. As a seaside city, this scheme is vital to safeguard homes and businesses from coastal flooding and protect our local economy for decades to come. By taking action now, we will help maintain our city, make it more climate resilient and able to adapt to increasing storms in extreme rainfall and rising sea levels. And Cabinet are also deciding this afternoon whether to transfer 4 council-run learning disability services to expert external providers. This is intended to maintain the quality of services provided and support independence for some of our most vulnerable residents, while also delivering better value for money. In other news, I'd like to thank all residents, businesses and community groups that responded to the government's devolution consultation for Sussex and Brighton and Hove, which closed earlier this month. We have submitted our response along with our interim submission on local government reorganisation. I had a very positive meeting with the local government minister, Jim McMahon, earlier this month in Crawley, along with my counterparts in East and West Sussex, to talk about next potential steps on devolution and the collaboration we need to achieve it, should the government decide to proceed following the consultation. We've also had our local government association peer review team in earlier this month as part of our continual programme of work to maintain ourselves as a learning organisation. It's constantly reviewing how we deliver our services, how we structure ourselves and how we run internally to provide the best services possible to our residents. The peer review was really positive and I look forward to publishing further details of it in due course. We've welcomed several Labour government ministers to the city since this cabinet last met to see the progress we're making on children's services to support our veterans and in sport. And following agreement at Cabinet last October, our updated housing allocations policy comes into effect this week. It provides a fairer framework so available council homes go to those most in need. From the 6th of May, the Council's customer service centres will move from Bartholomew House and Hove Town Hall to new help desks at Jubilee Library and in Hove Library. Dedicated staff will be on hand to help residents with queries, including applying for a bus pass, renewing a blue badge, and getting information on how to pay council tax. You'll also be able to access self-help facilities such as computers and phones, and in-person support will also be available at family hubs in Whitehawk, Moulscombe, Hangleton and Tarner. We are reducing the cost of even more bus fares around the city, in addition to continuing to support the £1 short hot bus travel until the end of the year. From this Monday, the price of a medium-length journey will drop from £2.80 to £2.50. This will make it cheaper for residents to travel by bus to work or university, to visit friends and relatives, to get to the shops and access key services like GP surgeries and local hospitals. And it is really welcome and important news delivered by this Labour Council. Our Labour government has awarded us funding to replace high-emission diesel buses with low-emission electric vehicles. In partnership with the council, Brighton and Hove buses will introduce a further 13 electric buses in autumn 2026 on routes 5 and 6, in addition to the 16 already planned for route 7 from the spring of 26. This will help us to cut emissions, improve air quality on routes in some of the city's highest emission areas. And starting from the 5th of May, an exciting week of events is in store across Brighton and Hove to commemorate the 80th anniversary of VE Day. Events include a 1940s activities at the pier, talks at the Keep, live music at the bandstand, a family day at Downs Junior School, and an evening service at the Peace Statue and a lighting of the beacon on the 8th of May. I encourage everyone to honour those who served and sacrificed during the Second World War and to reaffirm our shared commitment to a more peaceful world. Finally, I encourage you all to keep an eye on the roofs of bus shelters as you travel around the city. The council has helped facilitate an exciting exhibition of iconic seaside images by photographers Martin Parr and JJ Waller, which are being displayed on the roofs of bus shelters around the city as part of the Brighton Festival. They'll also be on display for everyone at Hove Museum, the Seafront Gallery and local poster sites. This is also a good reminder for us all to get involved in the events at this year's Brighton Festival and Fringe, which the council is proud to support throughout May, which starts, of course, with the iconic Children's Parade Saturday week on the 3rd of May. With no further ado, we'll turn to call over, and I'll propose that all items are reserved for discussion. Does the Cabinet agree? Agreed. Thank you, colleagues. And this brings us then to public involvement. We did have a petition concerning a basketball hoop in Queen's Park. Kate Francis was unfortunately unable to attend the meeting today, and so I'll ensure that a copy of the response is sent in writing to Kate after this meeting. Does the Cabinet agree to note the petition? Agreed. Thank you. So we now turn to written questions from members. Questions can be found published in the addendum. We have 15 minutes set aside in total for member questions. We've got a busy agenda today, so once I've reached time, I'll move to the next item and written responses will be sent for the remaining questions. We have received 22 member questions for this meeting, so I'll rotate through those members in attendance, asking you each to ask your first two questions as the fairest way to manage the questions. If there is time, I will then take further questions again in rotation. Yes, so I will kick things off with Councillor Fishley. Councillor Fishley, if you could ask your first question, please. You're on mute, Councillor Fishley. You still seem to be on mute, Councillor Fishley. It's telling us that you're unmuted.
Now?
Oh, there we go.
Oh, sorry, that's me. I'm on the train. I changed my question a little bit, but I think the answer will be the same. We now know that resurfacing Rottingdean High Street and refurbishing its red brick pavements will cost £450,000. We have 110,000 of 106 money. Please, would you explain why this work on this major through road hasn't been included in the capital maintenance programme?
Thank you, Councillor Fishley. I'll turn to Councillor Mooton for a response.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Fishley, for your question. We follow an objective data-led life cycle asset management approach to develop a prioritised programme of planned maintenance. A life cycle approach is a data-led technique used by most local authorities to monitor and predict the future condition of these highway assets so that they know which roads to treat, how to treat them, and what to treat them to maximise the lifespan of each asset. This reduces the whole life cost, enhances the asset life, and reduces carbon over the time. By following the life cycle approach, we treat roads each stage of their life cycle, so the overall life of the asset can be extended. This delays the need for costly resurfacing and reduces the whole life cost to the asset. A life cycle plan it includes cost-effective preventative maintenance such as rejuvenation and preservation treatments that are applied to surface whilst they are still in good condition. This will keep our roads good and longer. Alternatively, if we look at a worst first approach, we would only be treating roads once they have failed. Resurfacing roads is a very expensive in terms of cost and carbon, and therefore following this approach would result in only a small number of roads being treated each year within our grant funding. This would result in more roads failing each year and would afford to resurface, and therefore the cost to reactively maintain the roads in a safe and would grow year on year. Each year, we carry out a full network condition survey and reprioritise the roads based on new data. The next survey is scheduled to take place in May, June for these roads, and this will inform our 2026-27 planned maintenance programme. I'm aware that the Council Transport Officers have recently met with yourself and Rottingdean Parish Council to discuss options for Rottingdean High Street. I am more than happy to come to Rottingdean following this next scheduled survey of the A259 between Rodine Road and Rottingdean High Street to discuss its inclusion in the planned maintenance programme accordingly, together with other local transport plans.
Thanks, Councillor Mooton. Councillor Fishley, do you want to ask your second question?
Sure. Please, would you explain the £728,000 in the papers today for Valley Gardens 3?
Sorry, Councillor Mooton, yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Fishley, for your question regarding the delivery of the transformational Valley Gardens 3 Phase 3 project. Just to recap, Valley Gardens is an exciting transformational project which will redesign the heart of the city, improving key public space. Once complete, it will provide enhanced environment and renewal of the key visitor destination in the heart of our city. It will provide a space that is inclusive and accessible for everybody. It will improve the safety and travel experience for pedestrians and cyclists while simplifying the road network for all. The £748,000 allocation is part of the initially agreed local transport plan grant element and complements the local growth fund allocation of £6 million and the £5 million council loan. This funding has already been agreed, and officers are not anticipating to exceed agreed budgets on this project. In short, it's not new money. Having visited this project with the project manager only last week, I can confirm excellent progress to programme and to budget. In fact, we are steps ahead, and the work to date is already transforming the eastern side of the Old Steam There is more to do, and to do this previously shabby-looking area. Yet we are making making a huge difference already and delivering a well-planned, fully funded scheme. It's all about time, and it's about time, and this administration delivers.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mooton, and thank you, Councillor Fishley, for your questions. I'm going to now ask Councillor West to come and ask questions, and we've made space available there.
Okay, I'm going to ask question number 17 relating to the local transport plan. It's welcome to see that 2 sections of Ditchling Road between Viaduct Road and Five Ways are listed in Appendix 1 for resurfacing, and it's appreciated that the Cabinet member has listened to Green Ward councillors' concerns about the urgent need for this. While many residents will welcome inclusion of their streets, I cannot, however, understand the rationale whereby so many lightly used roads, including short cul-de-sacs, are to be improved, while busy bus routes that are in no better condition than farm tracks, for example, Carden Hill, remain overlooked. Given the scale of public funding being committed here, does the Cabinet member agree that detail of the rationale behind each proposed improvement should have been included in Appendix 1 so that the public would be able to see how the prioritisation choices have been arrived at? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor West. Councillor Eaton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor West, for your question. Which I'm sure you value importance of following an objective and fair data-led lifecycle asset management approach to develop a prioritised programme of planned maintenance. I set out some of the background for that in my previous the question previously to Councillor Fishley, so I won't say that again. And to reference that point about if we took the worst case approach, we wouldn't have a budget. So I think we agree that the planned and objective approach is correct. I want to just pick up on one point there. Carden Hill is now included as an additional site for micro asphalt treatment. This has not been included in the indicative programme as suitability for the proposed resurfacing method of Carden Hill had not been confirmed by engineers at the point of publishing the programme. However, now the survey report confirms the proposed method is suitable and the need for priority resurfacing Carden Hill has been included in this year's 2025-26 resurfacing priority list. What we do have we have published within the papers, and I was very keen to bring this forward, is our policy, which hasn't, the first time it's been refreshed for some 4 years, which sets out the basis for the approach we take, and we do survey each road on an annual basis as well, which informs the programme. So that it's an objective and fair approach, which we look to maintain the whole of the system, hold the network within. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor West and Councillor Eaton. Councillor West, your next question.
Well, I thank the Cabinet member for the response, but it really would help if much more of this was written down. So question 19, which is also on the local transport Plan Capital Programme, 3.13 notes that the estimated backlog for maintenance of roads is £57 million and £39 million for footways, and further states that to prevent further decline of these assets, a loan requires an estimated budget of £8.45 million. The sum committed by Labour administration to highways maintenance given in Table 1, however, is £5.283 million, far less than what is needed just to stem the decline, let alone address the backlog. Does the Cabinet member agree that the government funding is woefully inadequate and that if the government is to be believed in its pledge to fix the foundations, then it needs to make a serious commitment to increase in funding so that all our roads, and footways will be properly restored by the end of this Parliament? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor West, for your question. We've over a decade of underinvestment into maintaining our nation's highways and pathways over the previous Tory government. It cannot be understated. We have a severe backlog. Further, potholes are a symptom of a deeper problem. Timely maintenance save costs. Yet the Tories did not care about our roads and left us in a state of decline. And as much as I very much welcome the new Labour government's substantial uplift in grant funding to our roads and pathways, I wish to make it very clear we will not reverse over a decade of decline in 1 year's budget. We will do more with some £8 million in this year's local transport plan capital programme, much more than before. It is not sufficient to undo the impact of more than a decade of Tory underfunding. However, our commitment is clear. With more, we will do more. This is why we will continue to lobby the government for further long-term investment. And in the meantime, we're exploring options to secure additional funding for alternative means to strengthen our ambition to make our roads and our pathways safer and better for all.
Thanks very much, Councillor West, for your questions, and Councillor Mooton for the responses. I'd now like to call Councillor Hill.
So both of my questions relate to the item on adult social care and the outsourcing of provision with relation to that. So my question, first one, is the document states that some families are keen to be involved in the evaluation and selection of the new providers, and they have been asked to identify any particular requirements that they would expect of a potential sixth provider, and a small number of family members will develop and evaluate a question for bidders. If bids received do not meet the family's expectations in their evaluation, will you keep the care home provision in-house? Do you believe that families feel sufficiently involved as desired in the selection process?
Thank you, Councillor Hill, for your pertinent question. So we're committed to involving families in the evaluation and selection of the new provider or providers. However, procurement legislation requires transparency, fairness and integrity in decision making. So we've received advice about how we best involve families in the decision, which can hold against any legal challenges. To ensure appropriate scrutiny of the bids, we require experienced and qualified evaluators for the questions that test a provider's ability to meet the requirements. Most questions, therefore, will be evaluated by council officers. Should bids not meet the quality expectations, the contracts will not be awarded at this stage, and decisions would need to be made regarding future procurement. We've consulted family members on their insights into what would be important in good quality service, and have given them the opportunity to develop and evaluate an element of the tender. Families of service users will be evaluating this element, which will feed into the overall score for each provider, made up of several evaluation questions. We've engaged with the local market in principle, and we're confident that high quality bids will be forthcoming.
Many thanks, Councillor Allen. Councillor Hill.
How do you intend to achieve the £400,000 saving?
Thank you, Councillor Hill, for your succinct and direct question, which is very refreshing. To achieve in-year delivery of £400,000 worth of savings without affecting terms and conditions of staff transferring to the service or the ongoing quality of care for service users, we're looking at efficiencies across the wider learning disability provider services. This includes consolidating group homes where there is under occupancy, such as at the Ferndale Road facility. The single resident of Ferndale can move into a vacancy at Burwash Lodge. The Ferndale staff team will then transfer to Burwash Lodge and therefore reduce vacancies that are otherwise covered by agency staff. There is also some additional service savings from the closure of Ferndale Road on the premises related costs and supplies, and we're looking at alternative uses for this property in the future. There are also opportunities to ensure that the correct funding body is paying for these residents' care through annual reviews of their care needs. For example, some service users will be eligible for continuing healthcare funding from the NHS rather than from the local authority.
Many thanks, Councillor Hill and Councillor Allen. And that brings us to the end of member questions. And as I said at the outset, we will ensure that all other members will receive written responses. And thanks very much to those members that have come along today to ask their questions. That then brings us to the next stage of today's proceedings, which is matters referred to the executive, of which there are none. You're absolutely right, Councillor Hill. That's next. And I would suggest that you stay put, and what we can do is have your representation first, which I understand is on item 195, the transfer of adult social care and disability services. When you're ready, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Sorry, apologies for cutting in there. Ultimately, this isn't about improving services. I don't expect this to help maintain the quality of care. This outsourcing is happening for financial reasons, and it will cause harm and great uncertainty for people with learning disabilities and the staff that supports them. Following this, we'll also see massive cuts, about 8% in the next year, of the total adult social care budget, which will be carried out. I think this report was short. I think the effects that this has on care need to be better addressed. What we heard before about Ferndale Road wasn't mentioned in the report itself. I think this is going to be quite distressing for a lot of people who are very vulnerable and their families. And it's concerning to me that they don't seem, from what it sounds like, to actually have a voice directly in actually whether or not this will be kept in-house or not. There may be other questions that you will enable them to ask, but on the fundamentals of it, it's not down to them. And that's something which I feel concerned about. And that's also reflected in the report, where it says as a risk that essentially there's the voices of the people currently in receipt of these services are not heard. So that's specified in the report. Another thing which seems a concern to me is it says in the terms of benchmarking for our in-house provision compared with the independent sector, it says that the spend per capita is £34 versus £10 in the South East average. So we're talking about 3 times difference in the two. So I'm unconvinced that it's only consolidation and changing in the grant provision which is going to lead to the saving. You're going to get a difference in the quality of service if you put less money into it. That's just how it works, unfortunately. And that's what the kind of staff perspective has been when they've raised this as well. So I think this comes as part of a broader context of the fact that we need proper adult social care reform and broader funding for this. And I'd call upon the local council to have a backbone on this and to stand against the demonisation of autistic people who are terrified of cuts to PIP, as well as other groups such as trans women like myself who are under attack at the moment. The recent actions and statements made by this government will directly lead to the deaths of vulnerable people. And I think we have to be mindful when making decisions that affect extremely vulnerable people, that they will be greatly harmed, and that ultimately this government is not actually in any way caring about their lives. So we have to be able to stand up against that. And I know that's talking about broader things than just this item directly, but I can't not speak on this because this is absolutely appalling, having to live through this. And I think we need to have solidarity, both people who are disabled, like myself, and trans people, because we're going to have to fight something we've never had to fight before quite this badly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Thank you for your representation. I'm now going to call Councillor West.
Thank you, Chair. Are you going to mention what my representation relates to? You did for Councillor Hill. It's to the capital assets.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor West, I should have introduced that.
Okay. Right. It's probably fair to say that most people have neither the time nor interest to engage in the minutiae of local government. That is the role that they expect their local elected representatives to perform. This democratic settlement depends on people feeling their elected representatives are accountable and working in the best interests of communities, being open and transparent about the questions of the day, and showing they're prepared to listen and keen to find ways to genuinely include more people in decision making. This Labour administration is aiming to form a £20 million investment fund from the sale of publicly owned capital assets. Here in this thin public report, we are given the names of just 4 assets, with 0 details on their value or why they are regarded ripe for disposal or development. This, though, is clearly the thin end of what Labour plan to sell, with the rest hidden beneath the convenient guise of commercial sensitivity. We, elected members of the council and the public, are simply left to wonder what else is being lined up for privatisation, how far this might go. These are public assets. They do not belong to the Labour administration. They belong to the people of Brighton and Hove, held in trust by the council. Citizens elect 54 councillors, and all of those representatives should be permitted to know what is at stake here, to know what is going on. Yet we are kept from this vital information, unable to see the choices being made are sound, whether the reasons for secrecy are justified, and whether the owners of these properties, the people of the city, should be better informed. This is not an isolated case. Since adopting the cabinet system, Labour have severely restricted any real understanding of what they are planning to do. Labour's lack of transparency and inclusivity is damaging to public trust. It is unnecessary and simply plays into the hands of insurgents like Reform, who thrive on projecting established parties as secretive and self-serving, while falsely suggesting they themselves, as untarnished outsiders, offer a common sense, transparent and honest alternative. Democracy is in danger, and Labour has a choice here to change. Take a challenge, if you will. Demonstrate the humility and integrity expected of your public office. Take the first step here today in rebuilding trust in this council administration. Defer your decision and open up this report to all councillors to see what of the family silver you are planning to flog, so that we and the people of the city can tell you whether we think that is wise. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your representation, Councillor West. We'll now move to the reports for today, and the first report is our capital asset strategy. And I'm going to ask Councillor Taylor to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll just catch Councillor West before he leaves the chamber to respond directly to some of the things that he just said before I go straight into the report, which is to say, I think some of what Councillor West has been raising and some of what the Greens have been raising overall in the last 12 months has less been about the actual precision of what's between part 1 and part 2. As a reminder to everyone in the chamber, part 1 and part 2 reports were not the invention of this administration. They've existed for many decades, and indeed there were many reports and items under the previous Green administration that went to the Policy and Resources Committee with part 1 and part 2 reports. And there's clear parameters that are set down nationally and interpreted locally by officers as to what things can go into part 1 and part 2 reports. What's really changed is we've got a Labour majority and a cabinet system which the Greens don't like. There's actually no real difference in what things can and can't be in part 1 and part 2. That said, that was the bad news. Here's the good news, which is I'm more than happy for these part 2 papers to be shared with councillors. I reject totally the idea that we're not transparent and open to scrutiny. I've been to scrutiny committee many, many times. I think I've taken a few things proactively to scrutiny committee. I'm answering a question now, Councillor West, which is that the papers will be shared with the Place Scrutiny Committee, which was what we agreed in the last instance in the King Alfred, which is that we'll be happy to share those with Scrutiny Committee. I understand that committee may well call in the decision, and again, if it's called in, I would welcome that and happy to talk through the details of it. So we will be sharing these papers with the committee, not all 54 councillors, as Councillor West implies, which was not what they did when they were in administration. Policy and Resources Committee was the committee that saw papers on things like capital disposals. The 10 members of that committee saw part 2, not all 54, and I think he understands that as well as any other councillor. Turning to the substantive report, Chair, and it's worth taking a step back before we get into the details of the context that we face in the city. And there's 2 important things to lay out. The first is the scarcity of land in this city and the land prices in this city. We have land prices, property prices and housing prices in this city, which are some of the highest in the entire country, and part of that is because of the scarcity of land. We've said it many times before in this meeting and in others that we're a small city, and we're a small city that is very difficult for us to expand. To our southern border, unfortunately, we cannot build extensively in the sea, and to our northern border, we cannot build extensively on the South Downs National Park. And so, in many senses, we're hemmed in, and we're a popular city. We're a popular place to live, and we're a commutable city. We're a city where people who get good employment in London, Gatwick, and elsewhere want to live and make their home, which is why we all live and make our home here, because it's a great place to live and it has great connections. So you add those 2 things together, the scarcity of land and the high demand to want to live here, and we have very, very high house prices, and we have a deep housing crisis, something that we've explored at this Cabinet Committee and indeed in many other committees. Every end of the housing market in this city, there is a crisis. For the young graduates looking to get on the housing market, it's almost impossible for them unless they're on very, very high salaries. And so you've got people living in house shares for much longer than was previously the case, and indeed versus other parts of the country. You have families in overcrowded accommodation who want a bigger space, but find that really their options are either to stay in the city in the crowded accommodation or move out of the city and get somewhere slightly bigger. We have thousands of families on our council housing waiting list. And then at the extreme end of our housing market, we have tragically people who sleep rough in our city. And so we have a broken housing market, and we have very, very high house prices. The second bit of context that's really important for us to acknowledge is the financial sustainability of this council, and indeed many other councils. I believe, and that's for the public to make up their minds, that we've done a good job as an administration to steady the finances of this council, to set budgets that are sensible, reasonable and deliverable each year, whilst transforming huge elements of the city and improving services and maintaining services. We've been setting those balanced budgets, and we've been coming in on budget each year, actually delivering that. And I'm confident, although we're not there yet, I'm confident that we will come in on budget this year. That follows the position that we inherited from the previous administration, which was a large overspend on the general fund, 3.5 million overspend, the first time that had happened in the history of this unitary authority. And that took our working balance, our general reserve on our general fund down to the lowest level, below the minimum level recommended by the Chief Financial Officer. And we know, and we've just heard previously from Councillor Hill about some of the cost pressures in things like adult social care, that we continue to have a very, very difficult set of financial circumstances in this authority. And so it's those 2 bits of context with which we have to look at our asset base in the city and our overall strategy for using our assets. Just to recap something that Councillor Sankey touched upon, it's worth looking at, well, what are our assets? The council is a significant asset holder in the city, which in many ways is a good thing. Broadly speaking, you can put those into And 5 categories. There's operational buildings, including the one we're currently sat in, but any building that has large amounts of council staff doing their jobs, we have those operational buildings. We have a commercial portfolio of properties that are rented out to commercial tenants. Part of that is about providing certain types of space in the city, but part of that is generating an income for the council. We have our agricultural portfolio. We have a significant number of farms that sit within the City Downland estate. We have our seafront assets, and then we have other in-house smaller assets, miscellaneous properties that are managed in-house. It's a significant portfolio, as I've said, but given the context that we've talked about, we have to think about how best to use those assets for the city and for our residents. It's worth touching on 3.6 in the report, which sets out some of the principles when thinking about dealing with those assets. The first is rationalisation of operational properties. Clearly, the council has less staff than it did in previous years. Also, there are more staff that work flexibly. And so in that context, we've got to make sure that we're using our operational buildings in an optimal way. There's no point having theoretically 5 big properties spread across the city that are only 50% full. We may as well consolidate those properties and get people in one place. The reason for doing that is operational buildings don't come for free. Just because we happen to own this building and other large buildings for operational purposes doesn't mean they run for free and the employees just come in. Big buildings have big operational costs, from repairs and maintenance to regulatory compliance, but also heating, electricity bills, etc. And so we've got to try and make sure that portfolio is rationally used. The second is regeneration. In the report, it's called regeneration and development sites. That's absolutely key to what we're discussing today. We've got very limited land in the city, but the council does own some of it. It's incumbent on us, with that context of the housing crisis, to look at every single bit of land and say, can we use that for housing, and can we use it for council housing and social housing? And that's exactly what we're proposing today. We're proposing a number of sites to be permissioned in principle for release, releasing those sites for better use for the city. And the primary objective there is to get more housing in the city, starting with social housing and council housing. We also have to consider the performance of our commercial properties. Clearly, if we're holding commercial properties with commercial tenants, i.e. people running shops, factories, businesses, etc., we have to think about the income we get from those properties versus the value of those properties. And there's no point releasing some of those properties, including in some cases to the tenants themselves, if we're making a high level of income versus what you could get from a capital receipt. And so when we're looking about releasing assets, it's important to consider that income versus value equation. Point 4 notes that we sometimes get unsolicited offers, and often those offers have been from large commercial tenants that have either a short lease or a medium-term lease and operating a business there, and they say, well, we would like a long-term lease, please, on this property to give us some certainty, including for perhaps redeveloping it, adding facilities, etc. And so that's a good thing for those businesses, and it's a good thing for the council, because we would get a capital receipt from that. And sometimes we'll also consider freehold releases of those assets. And then the 5th one is considering heritage assets. There are no heritage assets in the Part 2 report, but it is worth flagging, as the report does, that we have to think about the strategy of our heritage assets. And there are heritage assets in the city that obviously don't yield income because they are heritage assets, but it's really important to maintain them. I think it's worth acknowledging in some cases we are not currently able to maintain them to the level they should be, and so we will need to think about that going forward, although that is not covered in the Part 2 report that we're looking at today. In conclusion, Chair, contrary to what some opposition councillors have suggested, this is absolutely not about flogging off the family silver. To the contrary, this is about building social housing in our city, in a city with very scarce land. This is about releasing sites that are not needed for core operational purposes to facilitate development in our city and more housing, whether that's social housing, affordable housing, or private sector housing. We need more of all three of those categories. And it's about investing in transforming services. I sometimes wonder whether the opposition truly understand this. There's sort of talk in some of the questions about creating an investment fund with things that you're going to sell off. That investment fund does two things within this authority. It invests in transforming services, improving services for residents, which, by the way, mean that you can offer services at a good level or even a better level at lower cost if you make those investments in things like IT transformation. And then there's also investment in our assets. What I didn't mention at the beginning in our in the financial section is that we have a difficult set of financial circumstances, but we have an ambitious capital programme, a very ambitious capital programme, from transforming Madeira Terraces in the east of the city to building a new leisure centre in the west, to transforming the centre of our city in Valley Gardens 3, to filling in more potholes this year, as Councillor Mewton has just said, versus previous years. We have an ambitious capital programme to transform the physical look, feel and operation of this city, and that has to be funded. And indeed, our assets that we retain also have to be invested in to make sure they're kept up to standards. So in conclusion, Chair, this is a report about an ambitious administration, a responsible administration that needs to use our assets sensibly for the benefit of our residents, for creating more housing and for investing in services. And I ask Cabinet to support it today.
Excellent. Many thanks, Councillor Taylor, for that very eloquent presentation of our ambitious and strategic goals. Do I have comments or questions from Cabinet members? I've got Councillor Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's typical that the Greens come asking us all the time to slow down, defer judgment. Every time they do everything at snail's pace, except acknowledge or apologise for the £2 million a year that we have to pay back for the I360. I don't think, if we think of it as family silver, I don't think there's anything progressive about hoarding silver and letting it tarnish in a cellar where we could be using it to grow our economy, to grow homes. And that's why I really support this, and I'm really pleased about it. I have some questions for Councillor Taylor, Chair. My first question is, can we just describe how this paper supports the budget we just passed and next budget setting? And the second question is, where we release property, it costs us money, that's costing us money, but through releasing that property, we create jobs and homes. That's a good thing, in my opinion. People want jobs and homes, good jobs and homes. But I asked Councillor Taylor, does he also agree with me that council tax receipts are also generated and that those are very important for our ongoing sustainability in running services, including for people with learning disabilities or children's services that I oversee?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Daniel. So in terms of the first question of it supporting the existing budget, we're obviously just into the new financial year of the budget that we've just set. I know Cabinet members will understand this, but it's worth recapping anyway. You can split our budget really into revenue versus capital budget. The budgets that we normally focus on and where we have to sometimes make savings and that relate to frontline services are usually our revenue budgets, but we also have capital budgets, as I mentioned. What we can do is we can use capital receipts to fund, as I say, transformation, and that transformation can also support revenue budget. So that the transformation means that we can invest in IT systems or other things in equipment, etc., that will mean we can run services better, more efficiently, and therefore make longer term savings. But what it does in the short term is it replaces things that would otherwise have to be funded from revenue. So to put it in simple terms, if you can fund £500,000 of IT and equipment investment from capital receipts, that's £500,000 that would otherwise have to come from our revenue budgets, and that £500,000, which we didn't have to make in a budget in many areas, would have to be taken from services, and so we'd have to be looking for more reductions in the frontline services, the services that we know residents really care about, whether it's toilets, playgrounds, nurseries, or dare I say it, paddling pools, those frontline services that we need to defend for residents. And so this strategy enables us to make those investments in transformation, which in turn save us from having to make more savings to frontline services. So it's really, really important. In terms of releasing some of these assets, there's a combination of releasing things to existing commercial tenants if they want to expand their businesses or invest in their businesses. That's good for the city, and it's good for local employers, and it's good for jobs. But as you also say, if we're releasing land for housing and the primary call on that land is us, the council, moving things over to the HRA and building our own new social housing, whether it's that or indeed whether it's building affordable housing or indeed private market housing, all of those things yield council tax for the council. It's worth also noting that, as we've said, I don't think there's been any year in the last 13 years where we have hit our housing target. Councillor Allen will know about this from the planning side. There's not a single year where we've hit our housing target that we've set out. So we haven't been building enough properties. Last year was the most properties that had been built. I think it was 1,075 properties in that year, the most that have been built since 2013, which is great and something we should be proud of, but we've got to build more of them. The primary reason we've got to build more of them is we need more homes for our people. We need more homes for families, for people starting out in life, for people wanting to stay in the city and not move out. But it does have the benefit, as you say, Councillor Daniel, that every property we build will bring in more council tax for this council, so we can deliver frontline services.
Thanks very much, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. What the Green Party in this city failed to understand is that we're entrusted not with sitting on assets for nostalgia's sake, but for using our portfolio strategically to deliver housing, economic regeneration, to provide services, reduce inequalities, and create a cleaner, greener city. And unlike our predecessors, the days of clinging to underused, high-cost and functionally obsolete sites are over. Our progressive vision for the city requires capital, and this strategy gives us a way to realise it after over a decade of brutal Tory austerity to local government. Rationalisation frees up essential funds and enables a smarter, more efficient use of our space. So I'm of the firm view that vacant, crumbling assets are not a legacy, they're a liability. And if they can be brought back to life through responsible transfer or redevelopment, then that's their true legacy. I welcome the proposals and the principles behind this report, and I'm proud to be a member of a fiscally radical Labour-run local authority. And I thank Councillor Taylor for this paper.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Hear, hear. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Robbins.
Yes, thanks very much, and thank you, Councillor Taylor. And I find it quite extraordinary that the Greens brought this delegation, which was, attacking the administration, didn't even think it worthwhile to stay for 10 minutes to listen to the report that was given. You would have thought, having felt that passionate about it, as we saw there, that they would have at least wanted to listen to what was said, but probably not. And that may have had somewhere more important to go, I'm sure. And the other thing that I'm reminded reading this, when it talks about the Downland estates and everything, of my old friend Bob Carden, Councillor Bob Carden, whose birthday it was this week. And he, I know if he was sitting here, he would have told you about his ancestor Herbert Carden, who bought all the Downland estates at his own expense and then sold it back to the council for the same money. So he really benefited the city by doing that, although he wasn't all good because he also wanted to knock down the entire seafront, believing it to be crumbling old Regency rubbish and needed to get rid of. He also wanted to get rid of the Royal Pavilion, which he felt was a bit flashy and didn't deserve to be there. But that's Herbert Carden all dealt with. But it would seem to me as well eminently sensible
that you all the time you look at your assets and see what you can buy, what you can sell, what you can do. Otherwise, what you do is just sit still, just sit on it and not do anything. And don't help yourself or anybody else from that, for that matter. So I think it's a good report. It's a sensible report, and I know we're going to discuss it further later on. So it has my full support. Thanks, Ray.
Thanks very much, Councillor Robbins. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. As the cabinet member with responsibility for the family silver, I can assure all Green councillors that what we are selling is not the family silver, which a previous Labour administration worked to protect through putting it into a standalone trust. So we remain the freeholders, and the standalone trust is a leaseholder, and that the family silver is being protected, and we're actually restoring it on the seafront. What we are, if we're going to stay with this metaphor, disposing of are the very old tarnished, not silver, but tin spoons that have accumulated in the back of the drawer and are cluttering up the drawer and making it harder for us to keep the family silver in good shape. I fully recommend this report. I think this is a strategy we need to follow.
Thank you very much, Councillor Miller. I think we've had a good discussion about the sort of principles and the strategy here. Councillor Taylor, did you want us to move into part 2 as well on this item?
Yeah, I think we can be brief, but let's do that, please.
Excellent. So we're going to move now into part 2 on this report, and I request that those without a direct interest in part 2 vacate the chamber, and we will call you back in when we have finished with the part 2 section. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I now propose accepting the recommendations as detailed in this report. Does Cabinet agree? Agreed. Thanks very much. We now move to the second report this afternoon, which is the Local Transport Plan Capital Programme for 25-26. And I'd like to ask Councillor Mootin to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. I am excited to present to Cabinet today more than £8 million worth of improvements to our city's roads and pathways in 2025-26. The Local Transport Plan, or LTP, programme for this year demonstrates how we help to deliver a better Brighton and Hove. This report sets out how we will allocate grant funding for transport directly contribute to the delivery of a city to be proud of by supporting a delivery of an accessible, clean and sustainable city. Furthermore, this report demonstrates the Council's clear ambition to manage resilience against climate change and contributing towards achieving net zero. We also know our roads and pathways matter, and many are in a deteriorated state. The public have had enough of potholes. Years of underinvestment and unmanaged decline under the Tories caused real damage and placed all of our roads and path users at risk. In particular, those most vulnerable, including motorcyclists, pedestrians and those with accessibility needs. This not only affects our residents, but our businesses and our visitors. Tackling potholes is one of our key priorities. That's all of us at Tories Harmwood's Way. That's not okay. And this is why I am very pleased that Brighton and Hove has received £8.366 million grant funded, £1 million that is grant funding that will be spent on making our streets, Brighton and Hove, better, safer and smoother over this financial year. We are set to repair roads and pathways for a bigger programme than before and sort out our potholes. Almost £4 million will be spent on improving our roads. An extra £2.1 million will be spent on addressing immediate problems on our roads, including potholes. £620,000 on improving pavements. More than £3 million will be spent on improving safety and accessibility and creating space for active and sustainable travel. We have a focus on safe, accessible and sustainable travel. We, as well as tackling the conditions of our roads, will also be working to make our roads safer, accessible and encouraging more active and sustainable travel. So this includes £1.2 million will help to deliver the city's local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, or LCWIP, including active travel schemes on the A23 and the A259 Seafront Road. We will also invest in £125,000 into our popular Beryl BTM bikes and cycle pathways to enhance that public access to bike hire scheme. And £325,000 will be spent on our school streets and safer, better street schemes, making our roads, crossings and junctions safer, especially outside schools. Another £75,000 will be used to reduce collisions in the city. £200,000 will make our streets more accessible with more dropped curbs and improving public rights of way. While the plan sets out our work over the next 12 months, it will run alongside a wider programme which includes our bus service improvement plan, active travel funding and £6.5 million spent on street lighting and infrastructure projects, totaling almost £20 million. So more information about the local travel plan for this year to come can be found in the Cabinet report. I have specifically sought that this paper to Cabinet is accompanied by a refresh of our highways maintenance policy. This has not been updated since 2021. This policy sets out the frequency of inspections, the prioritisation of planned works, the classification of repair, including reporting mechanisms and response times for defects, or better known as potholes. We will be taking a strategic approach to tackle the maintenance backlog caused by years of underinvestment. Our maintenance policy is timely and welcome. This critical risk-based and responsive approach, built within our refreshed highway reactive safety maintenance and inspection policy, aligns with government guidance and provides an objective and fair framework in which to prioritise limited funding for reactive safety maintenance. This will ensure reporting is open so we can be as a more responsive council where residents can see more easily the actions we've taken to address their concerns. We will prioritise the worst affected areas. Officers in the highways team have been busy collating the priority list and setting out an objective data-led approach to repairing and maintaining our highways and pathways. From this fair data-led approach, where each road is routinely inspected and reports of defects responded to, a robust programme of works is established. I am asking Cabinet to agree the planned maintenance programme for the next 12 months on that basis. We must recognise and cannot ignore that we have had too many years of underinvestment under the previous government, which has led to a huge backlog of repairs and maintenance. This is not unique to our city, it is a nationwide problem. With county councils and unity authorities across the region and beyond, all crying out for more money for their roads. The Tories in government simply did not care about motorists and their unmanaged decline of our nation's highways, but lives at risk, damaged vehicles, and created a huge backlog of unrepaired roads and pathways, basically potholes everywhere. With years of Tory decline, the condition of many of our road surfaces is simply unacceptable. I welcome the new Labour government's commitment to substantially increasing investment into our roads. We must, however, be honest. This will not reverse over a decade of underinvestment and decline in 1 year's budget. Nevertheless, with £1.6 million more government grant than last year for Brighton and Hove's highways, we can and will do more, much more. This plan will set will see us prioritise the areas most in need to improve over the 12 months. A pothole is a symptom of a deeper problem. Each Tory pothole is symbolic of insufficient and short-sighted lack of investment under the Tory government. To put this into context, it costs approximately £200 per square metre to repair a pothole, compared with £10 per square metre to carry out the maintenance to prevent them from happening in the first place. A simple fact that makes the shortfall in funding by the previous government so shocking and so short-sighted. This paper shows a clear commitment to ensuring we develop a resilient transport network and use limited resources to efficiently to deliver the best that can be for the city. I recommend, therefore, to Cabinet the Cabinet agrees the 8.366 million to 25-26 local transport plan capital budget as allocated in Table 1, Section 3 of the report, and notes the detailed indicative 25-26 planned maintenance programme as set out in Appendix 1, and agrees the highways reactive safety maintenance and inspection policy as set out in Appendix 2's report. With our highways maintenance policy refresh and a commitment to data reporting more accessible to residents who can see what we have done and where, I commend to Cabinet these plans for the year ahead. With more, we can and will do more.
Thank you, Councillor Mooton, for that really clear explanation of what I think is a very exciting report. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Mooton, and obviously officers within the transport team that have put this plan together and the funding together. I wanted to pick up on something that it's the first time I've heard Councillor Newton say it, but I wanted to agree with it. He referred to them as Tory potholes, and these are Tory potholes. Every single individual one of those holes in the city are Tory-owned potholes because of the ridiculous underfunding and strategic mistake they made to defund road maintenance and road investment during austerity. And Conservative councillors, one in particular that we won't name because they're not here and that would be impolite to name them, often pops up and points at potholes, but very rarely explains that it's his party that really created them. And perhaps we need to start reminding that person a bit more regularly of that. More substantively, I think it's a really good report, and I'm really happy with the overall approach. I was pleased to join Councillor Newton in Hillside in my ward of Moulscombe and Bevendine, the first road of the new financial year to be resurfaced under this Labour Council and this Labour government, something that residents were really, really happy to see and gave really good feedback, by the way, not only the fact it was being resurfaced, but the quality of the work and the repainting and extension of the yellow lines on Hillside as they approach the avenue. As Councillor Newton says, we can't turn it around in 1 year, neither nationally or locally, but what we are doing is investing money to sort out our roads for the safety and accessibility of our city and rebuild the damage that's been left by the previous Tory governments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. I think that is such a pertinent observation. Tory created potholes that we are now filling and roads that we are resurfacing. I've got Councillor Robinson next.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, it's brilliant that our Labour government has given us an extra 1.64 million towards this transport plan. But there's a couple of local things here. So I'm delighted to see, for example, 628,000 allocated in this report for footway maintenance. Recently, residents in Central Hove were delighted that some resurfacing work was undertaken on the pavements in Goldstone and Clarendon Villas. The tree roots were causing such terrible problems there. It was absolutely appalling. It was a shame to Emma and I, but that's now resolved, and hopefully many more residents will be happy with the results of this work. Also, I see the £1.2 million budget for active travel on the A23 and A259. As we're all aware, the current cycle lane on the A259 around King's Esplanade, Victoria Terrace and Hove Street is quite dangerous in parts. So welcome these works, which will massively improve the situation, and I assume well ahead of the wonderful opening of our new sports centre, King Alfred. Thank you, Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. I think you're absolutely right to focus on accessibility and pavements. This is an issue that I know comes up regularly, and I get contacted by residents about the state of our pavements. I'm really proud of the fact that this city has been recently recognised actually by Time Out as one of the most walkable cities in the world, in fact, because of our size and because of our topography as well. And that's something to be really, really proud of. But we must ensure that we aren't allowing barriers to be created that stop people walking. Active travel is, of course, about cycling, but it's also very importantly about walking as well. So making sure that our pavements are in a fit state is absolutely vital. I know that recently at one of my leader surgeries, a resident came to talk about issues in the central Hove area, I think actually in Goldsmith, and we have also addressed that concern. So work is already underway in focusing on pavements, and obviously this plan will enable us to do that even more. I've got Councillor Miller, I think, next. I've noted Councillor Allen, Councillor Robbins and Councillor Okins coming in after that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to say how much I welcome this, and especially the active and inclusive travel portion. As Goldsmith Councillor, the improvements they've made to Holland Road pavements, which were causing major concern to residents with accessibility needs, is very, very welcome. But I'd also like to address the potholes that's seen normally as an issue for drivers, but actually it's much worse for cyclists. And actually, as a cyclist, if you are using a roadway and there are potholes, it's forcing you to make often very last minute adjustments to avoid potholes, bringing you into danger. So I really welcome the fact that we are spending an additional 1.6 million. And confident that that's the direction of travel and that our roads will continue to improve because it is a major safety issue for cyclists. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. So this time last year was when Warren Road, the main drag in Woodingdean, was resurfaced. And the last time I heard the council getting praised about that was yesterday. And so this is something the residents of our city really want to see. They will congratulate Councillor Newton on social media and elsewhere for grabbing the bull by the horns and for tackling this issue. I particularly welcome Bexhill Road, which is an estate in my ward, getting some attention. Some of the last prefab buildings in the county. So they'll be delighted for getting some remedial work there. And they'll be delighted that the estates on the outskirts of our city, like those in Woodingdean and Bevendene, where Councillor Taylor was recently, they're getting just as much of a look in as the hustling, bustling city down the hill. This morning I met with a resident of Hove who has visual impairment, and she was telling me about how difficult it can be to be walking around the city. You constantly have to be thinking, you know, where am I putting my feet? Am I about to trip over? Constantly alert. And I'm really happy with the work that we're doing on this. People have noticed the work we've done at Holland Road, they've noticed the work we've done at Brighton Station, and they're going to notice the work that we're doing both on this programme and wider in things like Valley Gardens. So I really welcome this, and I look forward to the tarmac setting.
Thanks very much, Councillor Allen. Councillor Robbins.
Yes, well, in almost agreement with everybody else, and particularly what Councillor Taylor said, it's got to be worth almost 1.6 million not to look at the hypocritical opposition staring into a pothole, presenting it as if they've just discovered it, like a musician pulling a rabbit from a hat, and all the time knowing it's really down to their ex-government that they're there in the first place. But I'd like, as we're all shouting out for particular areas in our patches, I'd like to shout out for the resurfacing work that was done on the Old Shoreham Road between Southern Cross and the roundabout at Sainsbury's last year. I cursed it at the time because it held me up getting home every evening, but it really has made a difference to what is the preferred route for lorries down to the port. And it's really, as they say, as smooth as a baby's bum now. So well done, Trevor, and all your reports. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Robbins. Councillor Okins.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I'm not going to go over what everyone else has already said. I agree with basically all of it. It's really good to see, obviously, a combination of national government making this more of a priority and then us locally making it more of a priority. And the combination of those two things, I think, is really starting to notice it. I mean, I've been noticing it in the numbers in various papers that we all have, but I think more and more you notice it actually on the streets and seeing things, you know, like you say, buttery smooth, and also being responded to much quicker, I think. A couple of people have touched already on footways, and obviously the 628,000 for footways is very, very welcome. I suppose my question is how do we yet have as robust a system for prioritising work on the footway as we do in the highway? A slightly rhetorical question, because I think probably, as things stand, we probably don't just yet. But obviously with potholes and roads and things, you've got accident reporting and you know, you're much more likely to get really good data on which to base a prioritisation sort of system. So my question is about, you know, how that compares for footways. I mean, someone I know tripped over on a bit of an uneven, quite. I mean, I think someone mentioned earlier on about tree roots and stuff. I mean, our beautiful mature trees are incredible, but they have, you know, they were planted at a time where they weren't necessarily thinking 100 or 150 years into the future in terms of what the deformation of the pavements might be. And she had a fall there, but of course she didn't report it because people aren't in the habit of reporting on footways. So question there about that. And also just I wondered how the sort of ratio of that spend in relation to the highways aspect, you know, whether or not we're able to benchmark that in any way to other local authorities or you know, to sort of get a flavour of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rokins. Councillor Mooton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for various questions. A few things I'd like to pick up on. I want to really recognise there's a theme there in terms of pavements, and I want to say how important that is. Accessibility and safety along a pavement route may be the difference of somebody choosing, particularly those people with some accessibility needs, etc., will make the difference between them calling a cab or walking to the local bus stop. And that is a big difference. And so if they can't get to the bus stop, be it because there's three routes, which mean their wheelchair or their walking ability just means they can't get over a rough surface, or it's badly lit, or another means, is that may mean a car journey for them rather than a bus journey. And so active travel is the walk to the nearest bus stop as well. And Councillor Robinson highlights the Golston Villas pavements, and Councillor Miller and others here have referenced the recent improvements we've made in Holland Road pavement as well. And that did follow a laser surgery where a resident came and particularly highlighted the concern outside their block of flats, where somebody with a disability, I believe in a wheelchair, simply couldn't get along that pavement outside their flat. They were forced into the road, and there was a case where they had to be helped by a passerby out of their wheelchair, believe it or not, and get over this length of pavement. It was absolutely atrocious, and so we've addressed that. But and it is so vital that we do improve accessibility of pavements. So I've highlighted in this paper presented today that we're going to log all our drop curves around the city as a big project, and we're going to improve those. Now, that's one aspect of accessibility, but it's really important. It's not been done before, and we need to make sure that our drop curves are accessible. And then we also need to reference how to. So perhaps pick on Councillor Rokin's point about the 620,000 allocated specifically to pavement improvements. There is also that 2.1 million pot, which is there for a reactive response as well. That has been highlighted for highway, but it can also be used for pavements as well. So there is a potential pot there. We've got some flexibility, depends on reactive thing. One thing I didn't perhaps highlight in my presentation is that we're also looking at our IT systems to make our reporting tool work much better. We've got a system at the moment where you can report a pothole. We certainly encourage residents to do that directly onto the council site. You don't need to go to your local ward councillor to report a pothole. Well, let me get so clear. That's not the efficient way of doing it. Please report it straight to the council. It gets it logged, and we action it much quicker, much more effectively that way. So it really isn't up to your ward council to lobby that. But one thing we're going to do within our improved reporting is actually update and enhance our IT system. And so our new approach, which is coming in the next few months, is that when you log when you identify a pothole that you might see as you're going around the city, and then you'll be able to report exact location using maybe a pin or something else. It was very clear. It won't solely rely on a postcode, for instance. And what I think is so important with this new system is to be able to see, you log it, you upload your photo, and we've got a 28-day cycle. We'll be able to get a feel for how the progress is happening on that. So you can get a report whether it will be, whether it's been assessed, whether it will be repaired, and we can actually potentially get photos before, during, and after, accessible via that IT system. So we're opening up the reporting to the public in terms of the potholes that have been repaired, but also the visuals aspects of that. So that's generally exciting. So we're just thinking that engagement and be seen, making sure we are responding to it. And so that's again very, very important. Highlight that point about active travel as well, and I really do respect and note that point. People on two wheels are much more vulnerable to a pothole because it may be no difference between staying on those two wheels or getting off those. Whereas a car, yes, a car can get damaged, and that's not good at all. And these Tory potholes are causing an awful lot of damage to vehicles across the country. But the safety of cyclists and motorcyclists is absolutely paramount. And that's one reason why we're tackling potholes. We've got response time. Our policy sets out a response time based on risk and the different criteria. And you can see very clearly how we are to respond. And in some cases, the worst cases, we'll respond in 2 hours. We also see warping at certain bus stops. That's partly because of the heat of a heavy bus sitting over a bus stop over a period can end up warping the bus stop. And so we found a bit of money within our bus service improvement plan to contribute to our highways maintenance programme, which enables us to deal with that warping. And that, again, is a particular concern to cyclists and pedestrians maybe crossing over road at the bus stop as well. I really want to highlight Councillor Allen and Councillor Taylor's points about recent road surfacing, so Warren Road in Woodingdean and Bexhill Road there as well, Hillside, Bevendine and Millscombe, and previously we've done quite other work in Bevendine. We know that makes a big difference to each community, and it's so important that we do deal with the roads and resurfacing across the city. And Councillor Taylor highlighted the importance of refreshing the lineage. And in the Hillside, we've got there the following day, the same afternoon, I believe, after the resurfacing finished, and repainted the lineage as well. So it's a really good job. And I know the residents have fed back very, very clearly that the impacts that's having. So, yeah, I just want to say we absolutely know this is a really important thing to residents, to anybody driving or cycling or walking around our city, which is basically, and those people with accessibility as well, requirements, crossings, roads, and getting cycling around safely, etc. Basically, practically everybody in the city is affected by this, and that's why it's so important that we do it, and we do it well. And like I say, with more money we've received, we will do more, and we are going to do more with this programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all colleagues for a really interesting and very fulsome debate on this important report. I think it's really clear from comments and observations and the content of this report that this Labour Council is on the side of all of our residents, whether they are driving, whether they are cycling, whether they are walking by foot, with particular attention and care now being given to those residents that have accessibility issues and that may have disabilities that impact their ability to use our infrastructure. And actually, I had my regular catch up with Councillor Mooton earlier today, and it was really clear from that conversation how much you are focused in the year ahead on accessibility and supporting our disabled residents, and that is really welcome. Can I ask Cabinet whether they are happy to accept the recommendations detailed in this report? Agreed. Excellent. Thank you very much, colleagues. That moves us on to the second report today from Councillor Mooton, which is on Brighton Marina to River Ada Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Scheme, the project update and the phase 2 procurement strategy. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Mooton to introduce. Also, just note that there is a short part 2 report relating to commercial negotiations, and I'm going to propose that we go into part 2, but I'll ask Councillor Mooton to introduce initially and take comments and questions on anything non-sensitive in this report.
Thank you, Chair. And for much of Brighton and Hove's coastline, our beaches are our primary form of protection from coastal flooding and erosion. Although to the east we have a seawall and chalk cliffs, such as the Undercliff Walk, we do not have marshes or dune field to dissipate the energy from the powerful sea. Our beach and groin field form the front line of defence from the sea. The Victorians and Edwardians established much of the groin field upon which our city depends. This is ever more important with the threat of rising sea level and more intense storms due to climate change. We need to renew and enhance our frontline defence. The sea is rising. Unlike King Canute, we have a plan. not to stop the tide, but to build a bigger beach. And to do this, I present the next phase of this plan to Cabinet today. The scheme is to improve sea defences within areas along the shoreline between Brighton Marina, Black Rock, and the River Ada, Carrots Cafe location. That's the broad whole scheme. There are several locations that have been identified as required improvements to prevent erosion, flooding, or both. Our best defence asset is the beach shingle, which breaks up waves and reduces the sea's energy. Behind the beach is hard engineered solutions such as seawall, revetments, and raised structures, all performing the role of a combined sea defence structure. The new groin field at King's Esplanade and work on Southwick Beach now form two main areas of Brighton and Hove City Council's work. So the King's Esplanade, that's a replacement of 9 existing groins for new extended ones, and Southwick Beach, for the Brighton and Hove City Council only, the repair of depleted sea defences, including seawall. The new groins and wider beaches will protect the land and buildings along the area, including the new King Alfred Centre and residential accommodation once built there. It will also protect the properties and businesses beyond the popular promenade and keep the road and walkways open. This is increasingly pressing, with more frequent intense storms throwing pebbles onto the prom, limiting access, and concerns of residents' windows smashed, as happened recently, potential vehicle damage. Overall, the scheme is an Environment Agency-sponsored flood and coastal erosion risk management scheme. This scheme has 3 core stakeholders or partners, who are Brighton and Hove City Council, Ada and Worthing Councils, and Shore and Port Authority. Each stakeholder is responsible for their own financial contribution based on the work value to be carried out within this area. How and through what means each stakeholder raises their contributions may depend on many factors, including political or constitutional setup. Shore and Port Authority is a unique entity because it operates with public accountability due to its statutory nature. It is legally required to publish its annual accounts, produce a strategic plan, and hold annual public meetings. It is not classified as a private limited company or similar trading operation. The scheme is managed through a project board, which includes all stakeholders, but day to day, Brighton and Hove City Council is the appointed lead authority. This means that all operational aspects of this project with respect to their contributions are managed, actioned, and overseen by Brighton and Hove City Council. The cost estimates to this project were set up by the Environment Agency some 5 years ago. Since then, the total value of the scheme, phase 1 and 2, has risen from 35.5 million to 41.5 million pounds, which includes all contributions, granting aid, and risk of 20%. This is due to increased scope and inflationary costs over the last 5 years. As with all FCERM schemes, costs are updated at key stages along with revised programmes which are provided to the Environment Agency for review. This is standard procedure, and Brighton and Hove City Council is in the process of submitting the update with a revised request for an additional £5 million of funding. Discussions to date have been received positively, and a decision is expected in line with this figure, but is of course subject to approval. So the scheme has has, through the process of council approval, been divided into 2 phases. Phase 1 has spent 5 million on areas of activities, including detailed design, detailed specification, detailed costing for design specification, tender pack for Brighton Hove City Council area of works, accelerated construction of rock reinvestment, and new seawall at Hove Deep Sea Anglers Club, which has now been completed. The above was paid. The above has been paid via the FCERM grant in a drawdown in line with the agreed principles laid out by the Environment Agency and through the project board approval process. Full cost of the arrangements of the phase 2 work, as outlined in part 2 of this report. From this arrangement, £11 million of this current allocated capital contribution, which Brighton and Hove City Council would raise through borrowing over 50 years by the Public Works Loan Board. Over the £11 million sum borrowed, about £3 million would be directly loaned to the Shoreham Port Authority and paid back over the lifetime of the improvements, namely 50 years. The commercial terms and details are agreed under delegated authority. So in terms of recommendations in part 1, as it recommended that the Cabinet agrees to increase the capital contributions to the Brighton and Hove City Council Phase 2 works from 6.515 million to £11 million for the Brighton Marina to River Ada flood and coastal erosion risk management SCRM scheme. The Cabinet agrees to release unapproved sums allocated to the scheme for the purposes of Brighton Hove City Council works contained within the forward capital plan to approve status. These sums are stated in part 2 of the report. Cabinet agrees to authorise an agreed procurement process to select a suitable and competent supplier to carry out the Brighton and Hove City Council's Phase 2 construction work within Brighton and Hove City Council's area. Cabinet delegates authority to the Corporate Director of City Operations to take all steps necessary to award a suitable construction contract to the preferred bidder and enter into the contract any associated warranties and documents. And 5.1, Cabinet delegates authority to Corporate Directors, the City Operations, to take all steps necessary to act as a lead authority in project managing the scheme on behalf of the stakeholders and the Environment Agency, including entering into an agreement with the Shoreham Port Authority for the purposes of providing a loan for the works within Brighton and Hove City Council's boundary, but located at the port. There were items in part 2 which we'll go into part 2, but to close this presentation, to say in terms of where we are, we plan to commence this work in the autumn and we'll go into the spring of 2026, and we've intentionally rescheduled this from what might have been a work over a summer because of the particular value of the tourist trade industry in our city and the enjoyment of the beach over the summer months. And I would commend that we take forward with this plan.
Many thanks, Councillor Mooton. I think this is a really exciting and very important proposal for all of the reasons that you outlined. Do I have comments or questions from members on non-commercially sensitive parts of the report? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. Yesterday was St George's Day, and so I welcome Councillor Mooton's drive to make England bigger. But I'm prouder to be a citizen of Sussex more than I am to be an Englishman. So I'm delighted that our devolved mayor for Sussex will have more of a county to govern than even they're expecting to right now. One of the fabled sites that King Canute tried to demonstrate to his sycophantic courtiers that he could not hold back the tide, for he was just a man, was in Sussex. But this excuse will not wash with Councillor Mooton, and he should know we expect miracles by now. But in all seriousness, this is an important infrastructure project and a good showcase of joined up working with Ada District Council and Shoreham Port to make a coherent project for this stretch of coastline. I have a GCSE in geography, and even I forget how how important human management of our landscape is. And this just shows our administration taking our duties seriously in our environmental management. So I welcome this report.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Councillor Mooton. This is a really exciting, kind of once in a lifetime project. The officers have led some really innovative community engagement sessions on this. I attended one of those and had a go at a virtual reality thing, which was great fun, that demonstrated the effects of this. But what's really exciting, of course, is the benefits, which are massive. You know, the longer beaches, no more pebbles on the proms, we hope. Therefore, when we finally get the funding to renovate all of our lovely railings in that stretch, hopefully their improvement that they will stay good for longer. No more windows broken in Spa Court. And as you said yourself, the risk of flooding mitigated to those nearby living on King's Esplanade, as well as protecting the new properties that will be built on the King Alfred site, and of course our wonderful new sports centre that is coming very soon. So this is fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. If there's no comments, Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly to say how much I welcome this as the member who has responsibility for the seafront amenities. As Councillor Robinson has mentioned, pebbles on the beach are a constant problem and also damage our infrastructure, damaging pavement, damaging railings. And it also makes it harder to swim because if you have a very steep drop, it makes the beach inaccessible for people who are not very, very confident swimmers. So I really welcome this project. I think it will make our seafront and our beach a more pleasant and lovely place to be. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Miller. Councillor Meaton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for your comments and appreciation what this is about and why it's such an important scheme. I want to pick up on Councillor Allen's point about King Canute. Perhaps I was less aware that he did. He came to Sussex and requested this thing off the sea. A wonderful bit of history there, and but perhaps I've taken the council's growth agenda very literally by growing the city out to the sea as well. So take that forward. But Councillor Allen mentioned his geography school class, and perhaps there may be opportunities for those people, teenagers, say at school, studying geography and other such subjects, may want to see the effect of longshore drift and the actions we're taking in response to a rising sea level and climate change induced storms, making our city more climate resilient. And Councillor Robinson referenced a virtual reality for the public meetings that we had, and the video of that is very, very informative, and I recommend to anybody looking onto our website to see the video, which shows very clearly this scheme and how the beach will be expanded and a new groin field established. And the materials themselves will be principally brought in by barge, and there'll be a small compound on land, and so some of the plant and the contractors will be based there, but the materials themselves will be coming from the sea, so minimising the disruption of traffic through the city, which is also a very positive thing to note. And yes, there's so many other aspects, positive aspects to this, so thank you for your support. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Mootin. I'm therefore going to propose that we now move into part 2 for the remainder of this report. Which means that we need to exclude the press and public under section 100A, section 4 of the Local Government Act 1972 and move to confidential session. Thanks very much to those already leaving the chamber. We'll wait Thanks very much. Welcome back, everybody. And thank you for your patience. I now propose that we accept the recommendations as detailed in this report. Does the Cabinet agree? Agreed. Excellent. So we now move to the final report for today, which is the transfer of adult social care learning disability services. And I invite Councillor Allen, our Cabinet member, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. This is a significant proposal for the 4 services identified in the report: Burwash Lodge in Hollingdean, Preston Drove in Preston Park, Leicester Villas in Portslade, and Windlesham Road in Regency Ward. But let's start with a critical point, that this proposal was not brought forward in isolation. It was considered, scrutinised and ultimately approved by a majority of councillors as part of the 2025-26 budget passed earlier this year. It was debated in this chamber, gained democratic support on the strength of its rationale. And I'd particularly like to thank Independent Councillor Begin and Green Councillor Hill for their perspectives on this proposal during the budget debate in February, which were constructive and helpful. The potential to deliver financial savings to the taxpayer of Brighton and Hove, alongside delivering sustainable, high-quality care in a changing, challenging landscape for adult social care, is positive. Residents receiving care packages from the City Council deserve nothing less than high quality, dignified and person-centred care. Our adult social care services, delivered by dedicated and hard-working frontline staff and supportive management, deserve heaps of praise. The evidence and our statutory responsibilities under the Care Act tell us we must now explore new ways of delivering these services if we are to continue to meet both need and demand. 92% of adult social care provision of this sort is delivered by independent providers within our city, with whom we have productive and constructive relationships. These are not faceless corporations in it for a quick buck. Many are charities and community-based organisations with deep roots in our city and a long history of excellence. 85% of these services are currently rated good or outstanding by the CQC. And we know, because the local authority have been down this road before, that when we get the commissioning right, the outcomes can be wonderful for our service users. We saw this with the successful transfer of supported living services to the Grace Air Foundation in 2017. That was done with care, scrutiny, and with success. Hence why we're applying the same model again here. That's why I disagree with the perspective of Councillor Hill earlier today. This move will not cause harm to service users, nor are we making decisions without their interests at heart, as frankly, that is our job in a representative democracy, and it's why we're sitting around this table right now. But she's correct that there is a financial imperative. Our per capita spend on in-house services is over 3 times the South East average. That isn't sustainable in the long term, not for this council and not for the taxpayers we represent. The proposal enables us to realise a saving of £400,000 in the next financial year, savings which have already been built into our medium-term financial plan. And crucially, these savings are being achieved without compromising the quality of care or continuity of support to the residents with whom we owe a duty of care. Because of this proposal, we are not instead talking about closing homes or moving people into unfamiliar environments. The people currently living in these services will stay in their homes. The buildings will continue to be owned by the council with covenants on them for use in social care. The support staff who know these individuals best will continue to work with them. We've engaged with the people who use these services, with their families and carers, and with the staff who provide support day in, day out. Families will be involved in evaluating potential providers. Staff will have the opportunity to contribute to the service specification. And once the new provider is in place, there will be robust contractual obligations on performance monitoring and quality assurance. So, Chair, this speaks to the heart of what local government should be about: thoughtful, evidence-based decision-making, which balances financial prudence with our social responsibility. It reflects our council's broader direction of travel under this Labour administration to create a fairer, healthier, more inclusive city where services are responsive, resilient and sustainable. And for that reason, I commend it to my Cabinet colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Allen, for an excellent presentation on a very important and sensitive subject matter. Do I have comments or questions from Cabinet members? Councillor Daniel.
My first comment is that I'm really pleased that in making this change, people can stay in their homes, the place that they're used to, and that they can have some involvement in the choice of provider and what their priorities are. And I understand that some of the people won't really be able to be involved due to the severity of their disability, but wherever possible, it says in the report that advocacy will be there, and advocacy for people that aren't able to advocate for themselves will also be in place. So I commend that. I think that's really important. I guess my questions, although they are covered in the report 5.4 to 5.7, is just, could you just explain the impact on staff of this change, both going through the commissioning process and after that has concluded?
Thank you. Yes, so the staff who will transfer as part of this contract will be done under 2P regulations, and so they will retain their terms and conditions of employment that they currently have with us, helping to maintain their morale and their engagement and their job security. This will also reduce the risk of high turnover. From what we saw with this process in 2017 was actually a lot of the staff are still there now, and that was clearly good practice that we're hoping to replicate again.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. It's really good to hear the learning from previous programmes such as this really being taken on board and to develop the model that we use on this occasion. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Allen, for the report and officers. Obviously, the significant amount of work that is ongoing on this subject. I just wanted to really come in on the financial position, which is to reiterate what we've discussed a number of other committees, including Scrutiny Committee, where we looked at budget scrutiny, which is that we have observed that the costs of adult social care, of other care budgets for the council have continued to increase over a decade and a half. Demand, complexity and cost for these types of care services having increased. They've increased both in cash terms and real terms and in terms of the proportion of the overall net general fund. And so in that context, clearly, we're going to have to consider how those services are provided. There is no endless source of money that can just constantly increase our overall budgets, much as we want to increase local government funding, much as it has been increased, and much as we will continue to lobby, contrary to the suggestions of the opposition party, we do continue to lobby for more money for this local authority and others. There isn't an unlimited set of money that's going to be coming into our local authority. So we have to look at our services. And I think, as Councillor Allen said, within that context, this is not us closing a service, not us stopping a service. This is us looking at what's the best way we can deliver that service, a good service, within the overall financial envelope we have. And I think the way Councillor Allen talked us through that gives us reassurance, and the way that officers are handling it is that we are doing this in the best way. We're doing this with our vulnerable residents and service users at the heart of what we're thinking, whilst overall trying to secure the financial sustainability of the authority and be able to keep delivering services for everyone in the city.
Thanks very much, Councillor Taylor. I've got Councillor Williams next.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to check on 3.12. It says here it's anticipated a tender will be issued in July, contracts awarded in October, and the new service is commencing in February. So am I are we assuming that October to February is the sort of handover period? How well, from the contract being awarded to the actual takeover, that's 3 months. Is that handover period? Sorry.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Allen. Any more comments or questions? Councillor Allen. Sorry, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, well done to Councillor Allen and officers for this report and for this initiative. You know, it's incumbent upon us as a responsible authority to continue to seek out best value on behalf of our residents, and this is what we've done in this instance. And from what I'm hearing from officers and from Councillor Allen, that all efforts are being made, and the service will be as it is today. And it sounds like a win-win to me. So well done to everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Miller.
Just to say that I really welcome, thank you, Chair, of the way there is strong engagement with both families and carers, with the service users themselves and with staff. And I feel this is being done in a way that is, I think, potential to improve our services. And I'm really reassured by the process. So thank you. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I think I will hand over to you to wrap up.
Wonderful. I'd just build on Councillor Taylor's perspective in that in January, the government launched an independent commission into the financing and potential reform of adult social care. That report isn't due until 2028, but it's something that the Labour government are keenly aware of and are grabbing the bull by the horns, because the pressure does keep mounting, and us here on the ground, the local authorities, are having to try and wrangle our way through that. And so that's something I'm keeping my eye on, and hopefully will produce some positive reforms in the future.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allen. Really helpful wider context there. I will now propose that we accept the recommendations as detailed in the reports of the Cabinet. Agreed. Thank you very much, colleagues. Finally, I will just say, in relation to Part 2 proceedings, does the Cabinet agree that the items listed in Part 2 should remain exempt for disclosure to the press and public? Agreed. Many thanks, colleagues. Many thanks to officers for all of the hard work that has gone into some really significant and substantial reports today that are all part of our plan to make this city an even better, fairer, more inclusive place for people to live. I will, on that note, call the meeting to a close. Thanks, everybody.